This is the part of the show where we discuss issues to do with parenting and teenagers with Coach Tefadzwa. Coach Tefadzwa is a coach for teenagers, and we're looking at how much influence you have on your child. That's the question. How much influence do you have on your child and why it's important? Hey, Coach, good morning. How are you?
Good morning. I'm very well, thanks. How are you doing?
I'm great. How's the start to the week?
Started good. I'm enjoying it.
Wonderful.
Getting ready for winter.
Winter is here, hey?
Yeah.
Winter is showing up. Yeah, so we're talking about how much influence you have on your kid, on your child.
Yes, so it's actually a question that I'm posing to parents out there. How much influence do you have on your child? And it's a continuation of the topic that we started last week. So last week we were talking about having strategic partnerships with your child's teachers. And in that discussion, I made reference to the cliche statement that it takes a village to raise a child. And what that statement basically implies is that there are many voices that are competing for your child's attention. And whilst there are those many voices, how much influence does your voice as a parent have on your child in terms of shaping their character, shaping their personality, and shaping their future in general? So today we are basically talking about how you can increase your influence. But before we even talk about that, we want to know how much influence you think you have on your child. You know, I've noticed that a lot of times when something goes wrong, normally the parent is blamed, especially the mother. And I'm not too sure why. Maybe we get that perspective from our history, where back in the day most women were stay-at-home moms and they spent a lot of time with the kids, whereas the dads were at work trying to make ends meet for the family. So maybe because of that, people assumed since children spend most of the time with their moms, then their moms have the most influence in their children.
They're responsible for any bad behavior or good behavior.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But it's important to ask the question that then when something wrong happens, how much influence did the parent have before that thing happened? Because it may have happened because they've learned from everywhere else and not from the parent. So,
Coach Tefadzwa, like I've asked this before, like when you look at people who are in prisons, you know, who commit crimes, how they were raised, because I'm always like asking that question, like what was their background? What was their childhood like? You know, did they have any values that they upheld? What went wrong? Do we blame the parents or other things? Yeah.
Yeah, it's something very important to look into and see what exactly went wrong so that we can try and do something for the future. Because if you don't learn a lesson, then things can be repeated and continue to go on. So I would love to, if their parents were actually listening, it would be good to hear their feedback on a scale of 1 up to 10, where 1 you're saying that I've got very little influence, and 10 you're saying 100% influence. I am the one who's in charge, and 5 is just average. What rating would you give yourself in terms of the influence that you think you have in your child's life, like the way they dress, the way they talk, their behavior, and all of that? How much as a parent do you have influence? But anyway, like I've said before,
how much, parents, on a scale of 1 to 10, how much would you give yourself? Really want to know.
Yeah, I'll be very interested to know. And whilst we're waiting for their responses, let's just talk here a little bit about how, as a parent, you can actually increase your influence, because I believe that it's every parent's dream to have a lot of influence in their child's upbringing, a lot of influence in what they become in terms of their character and in terms of what they become even career-wise. Parents would want that influence. So the most important resource when it comes to building your influence in your child is time. So how much time are you spending with your child? You know, if you've got a tight work schedule, then that can be tricky. And maybe you're also living in the diaspora, your child are here, your child is here, or your children are here, and that becomes a problem. Or your child is in boarding school. That means the time that you have with them is limited. So in instances like that, you now then need to be very creative. You need to create time to be with your children, because you're not going to have any influence in their lives if you're not spending time with them. And unfortunately, I don't know if I should say unfortunately, or it's just a fact of life, childhood has an expiry date. Teenagehood has an expiry date. children are not going to be teenagers forever. They are just going to be teens for a defined time. And if that time is gone, it's gone. It may be too late to then try and do something. So you have to create time within the childhood phase. You have to create time to be with them. And when you create time, you now need to be intentional, because it's not just about spending time with someone, but it's actually about being creative and doing something about the time that you are with the child. I at church am responsible for children's ministry, so I ran the teens church and also the kids church. So I actually intentionally write the names of the teens that I want to engage on a particular Sunday. So in my mind, I'm telling myself I'm not going to let these ones go before I have a chat with them, just to find out how things are, like how they're doing at school, how's their relationship with their parents, things like that. So it has to be very intentional. Otherwise, if you're not making it intentional, yes, you may spend time with them, but that time you're spending with them, you may not be doing anything that is constructive, that helps you to actually have influence in their lives. So it's important. Maybe you're too busy, but you're the one who actually takes them to school. So during that period where you're just going to school, you may be intentional and say, whilst I'm taking them to school, I'm going to engage in some conversations with them. I'm going to engage them and get to understand what they're going through and get to give them maybe 1 or 2 life lessons. Because if you're not intentional, you realize, yes, you are with them, you're going to work, but whilst you're going to work, you're busy thinking about the reports that you need to submit. You're busy thinking about Maria Iskubatana, Renti Apa Duze, and all of that. And whilst your mind is that busy, yes, you're spending time with your children, but you're not really doing anything in terms of influencing them. So time is very important. Create time and try and be creative with the time. And then number 2, are you as parents censoring the information that your children are getting, especially through the media? Like, I remember during our time, there are certain movies that we were not allowed to watch. I remember there was Sunset Beach, and then there was I don't remember the other soap that used to be there during our time. And then we would be asked to go sleep. We were not allowed to watch that. So that was
that's why it was a big deal for us to see even people like kissing on the TV.
Yeah,
you close your eyes, you feel uncomfortable because it wasn't normalized.
But think about it now. I mean, even a little kid like actually understands. Sometimes you hear maybe 8-year-olds, 6-year-olds discussing about a drama that they're watching or a movie that they're watching, and you hear them say, oh, so this one has a crush on this one, and then this one is dating that one, and then this one slept with that one, and you're like, you guys, you already understand this, and how do they process that information, and what influence is that information giving to them? So it's important to actually censor. It's now difficult and harder because there's just so many avenues through which children can get information, phones, the internet and all, but at least make efforts, because this is how you will indirectly increase your influence on your children. Because if you just let them watch and listen to anything, it means all this information that they are that they're getting, that they're receiving, is defining them, is shaping their perspectives. And this is how then when they are 14, 15, they think so differently from your own values, and you're wondering, in this way, but it's all about the information that's been shaping them. And then the next thing here, so I've talked about censoring information. The next thing is have clearly defined rules and values. So more often than not, I talk to teens. I ask them, there are teens who actually don't know what their curfew is. You're like, do you have a curfew? What time are you supposed to be home? They don't even know, because this is a discussion that has never been had at home. So it's up to the teenager, it's up to the child to try figure out and assume, maybe ndikashikona 7 or 8. But there's never been a discussion. There are no clearly defined rules. So when something then goes wrong and you feel your child has broken a rule, it becomes unfair for the teen, because the teen is like, what rule did I break? I didn't know I had any rules. So what did I break? They now feel like it's unfair. But if the rules were clearly defined, there are issues like maybe drinking, taking drugs and all. These are discussions that I really had at home. We just assume, I'm going to assume Tirima Christu Saka mwana wedu anongozviziva kuti panapa
atidai.
hatidakwe. But even go to church, and maybe there's in a year or two there is no mention of this at all. So even if your child is going to church with you, they're not going to receive any information about this particular subject. I've talked to
Coach Tafadzwa, yeah.
I've talked to teens, some who were now having issues with drugs, and you realize that prior to this point, there had never been a conversation at home about drugs. Yatos owns were conversation because a child has been caught on the wrong side, and now we're trying to then go back towards it, but we'd never proactively had the conversation. So having clearly defined rules and values, that is very important. You know, I mentioned church, and I'm just reminded. We often say that mwana wamfundisi kawe kana kuti vana vamufundisi vane musikanzwa
kuti vanonetsa PK preachers kids my way vanonzi vanonetsa.
And you know what we assume, which is not a fact, is that spiritual growth is genetically transferred just because I'm your child. Oh,
that's a harsh reality, really.
Because you know, yes, a pastor might be preaching at church. They might actually get too busy with church work that they do not have time to preach the same message to their own children.
Influencing the church, but then at home they're not influencing
and not the
nothing.
Child. And we also should understand that a child and an adult, they're two different people, and how they learn, how they get information is different. You know, you can't take your son to your lecture kuyuni, and then you come out of that lecture and you're assuming kuti mwana wangu adzidza utaenda tese, and there was this great professor who was delivering a lecture saka tese tadzidza. Yes, you were in the same place, but then the way he needs to be taught is very different from how you would teach an adult. You know, they need their own space, they need their own, to be in children's church, they need those toys. The scriptures have to be delivered to them like in a way that's child friendly, so that they know and then they can relate. But even that, how many churches actually take particular care of what happens in children's church? Vanotombovene care yekuti are the teachers trained, and is the curriculum that these children are following? So sometimes we don't even look into that. Anybody who volunteers to be a Sunday school teacher is given the responsibility. We don't even know what these children are being taught, and yet when they reach a certain age, now we're assuming vakangozvarirwa muchechi, so they must be spiritually mature. But were we even concerned about what they were learning vachiri vadiki vacho vachiri kusunday school? So things like that, if you are to increase your influence in your child's life as a parent, then you need to be concerned, and then you need to look into that. I personally have said I'm a Sunday school teacher at church, but to be honest, I don't remember any day or time when a parent came to me just to find out what I'm teaching their children, just to find out how things are going. You know, I don't remember. So the parent is assuming all is well, but they don't know what I'm teaching their children. Yeah. So moving on, I'll also talk about the environment. So the environment has an impact on what your child will become. And if you are to increase your influence, then you have to be very mindful about the environment. You know, normally when we're considering where to stay and all that, we're thinking about our own needs as adults. Maybe we're thinking about the economics. We're saying, uku kunodhura, uku kachipa, or we're thinking this is close to my workplace, things like that. But we're also not considering our children. So certain environments are very toxic to children, because these are the neighborhoods that they're going to be raised in. So certain languages, you come back home and you hear them cursing, things that you can't even say as a parent, but your child is already saying them. And how is that come about? The environment that they're spending their time in. So maybe Jaramba, you can't be in certain neighborhoods. This is the only option that you've got. Have you put in place systems to ensure your child spends most of their times indoors or in the walls, so that they're not out and playing out in the neighborhood where they get all this negative influence? So it's important to look into that, because at the end of the day, you want to increase your influence. You want to have a child being groomed in the way you want. So you have to control the influences around them. And then let me not go into this. I was going to talk about relatives and all that.
Just say it.
Anyway, let me move to this one.
Relatives, just touch on it.
No, I'm not going to. I will some other time. Today is not a good day. I will some other time. So there's something that I'm working with,
Yeah.
with a group of parents, and I was just experimenting. You know, there are certain things that parents know, but for a reason they keep procrastinating and thinking, oh, my child is too young to know this, and before they know it, that child is no longer a child, is an adult. Information here, you know, they were saving the best for a time that never comes, and then time ya toenda. So they find it very difficult to share with the teens. And then teens also have information that they want to share with their parents, but sometimes they find it very difficult. So, you know, I've started working on a simple online platform where a parent and a teen can have a conversation. And that conversation, you know how sometimes when we are online, we feel less inhibited. There are things that people can say on X that they will never say in person, but now they just feel like, oh, I'm empowered to, and they can. So I'm trying to bring this also between parents and teenagers so that they have an opportunity to freely speak their minds, and then the parent has an opportunity to understand what the teenager is going through, and the parent also has an opportunity to share the information that they have that they think will be beneficial to their teen, but I'll bet in a less tense and in a cool environment, if I may to say. So it's something I'm working with, and I'll be sharing information on how it goes, and I'm hoping many parents would have access to that so that there's increased influence of parents in their children's lives. And then before I go, if you're a parent of a teenager and you would like to be part of our WhatsApp groups where we discuss this and more other important issues to do with teenagers, please feel free to send in your name and your child's name to my WhatsApp number. And my WhatsApp number is 0773 606 728. 0773 606 728.
Coach Tefadzwa, thank you. Always a pleasure to have you in the studio. Really, really appreciate you for these insights. Thank you so much. We do this again next week, same time. Taking our time to 11 o'clock, Star FM. It is time for the news.